Okay, thank you, John. Thank you very, very much, and it's a pleasure to be here again. You're quite right. I mean, a lot has already been said about the security challenges in the Eastern Mediterranean, and there's obviously no shortage. Actually, in previous years, I've been here talking about those things, and it seems that the list just gets longer and longer. But they're, I would say, really quite serious, and maybe I should just share with you three points. The first is to think a little bit about what these are. Some of them have already been mentioned. Some of it, if you look at it from the point of view of Cyprus, and that's really the focus of this session, I gather, it's a bit driven by geography, but it's not just about geography. A number of different things to mention here. But I think it's also important to note that had we had this conversation in previous decades, Cyprus itself would have been seen as a flashpoint, a security flashpoint in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's fortunately not really the case anymore. It's far from being resolved in political terms, but as a generator, a sort of a producer of security risk, that's just not the case anymore, which is fortunate. But there are a lot of things for Cyprus to hedge against. Some already mentioned. The question about the relationship with Turkey and Turkish policy in the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, I would characterize that now really as a precarious détente. It's not stable, but it's not what it was 2 years ago. And there are some reasons for that we can talk about, but that's a positive, I would say. Geography itself is obviously a negative. We sit here about 250 kilometers from Beirut. Hezbollah has missile systems that they have acquired from Iran and elsewhere that can reach here. It's not to say that they would want to reach here, but they can reach here. And they also have anti-ship systems that are capable of interfering with maritime commerce in the region, which would be of real concern to Cyprus and to Cyprus's partners, obviously. So that's something to worry about. Migration. Cyprus is already confronting, along with others, migration flows. Imagine what could happen if the situation in Gaza, if it's possible to imagine it getting worse, but it could get worse, and in terms of the movement of people, and what effect this could have on the stability of Egypt, and what in turn that effect the stability of Egypt could have on migration in the Eastern Mediterranean. Enough said. We now have 2 U.S. aircraft carrier battle groups in this region. One in the Gulf, one in the Eastern Mediterranean. They're not there to support Israel over Gaza. Yes, in a broad political way. But really they're there to hedge against the possibility of escalation in Lebanon and confrontation with Iran. This is something that, it's from a Cypriot point of view, rather bad news that we have a security environment in which that's necessary. On the other hand, in terms of all sorts of risks, that's not a bad thing. The second point I'd make is that, and we've heard very well from other speakers about the pressing issues in Ukraine still, obviously. And for all sorts of reasons, both NATO and the EU and the US have had a tendency to look east in recent years in terms of security. They will continue to do that for obvious reasons. But they're also going to have to look south now, too. The crisis in Gaza, but not just, is going to drive that. A growing concern about counterterrorism is going to drive that. And if we think about, from a Cypriot point of view, how the EU, but also NATO can work together in the future, the key tests, it seems to me, are going to be in this region, where you have this mix of hard and soft security challenges, where the EU and NATO have different instruments. As I referred to the US being present, we heard from the American ambassador earlier. Frankly, I think there's been a myth about American disengagement from this region. If the only metric is the presence, how many ships we have in the Eastern Mediterranean at any given time, it was much more 40 years ago. But that's not the only metric. And I clearly can see this being reinforced. Certainly, I think that would be in Cypriot interest to see that. And as we heard, the partnership is going very, very well. Then finally, just the location and Cyprus as a Euro-Atlantic asset, if I can put it that way. It's about sea corridors for humanitarian assistance in the near term, but also potentially in the very long term. It's about maritime security. It's about all of the connectivity issues that we heard about earlier, whether energy, electrical interconnectors. We didn't talk so much about undersea digital cabling, but there are all sorts of things going on which are going to grow in importance, it seems to me, in the next years. And this region here around Cyprus is really at the center of it. And just, a final point I would say for Cyprus in a European context. I mean, if the EU, Ursula von der Leyen and others talk about this, really serious about becoming a more significant geopolitical actor, this region around Cyprus will be the place where the key tests are. And that gives Cyprus a certain vocation. So thank you.
Thank you.